Soma drops you into a world that, to put it lightly, is going through a bit of a rough patch. A comet has slammed into the Earth and turned the surface into a scorched wasteland, wiping out almost all life. The last remnants of humanity are stranded in an underwater facility, and to make things worse, that facility is controlled by a rogue, self-improving AI with a unique interpretation of what it means to preserve human life.
Human? Shit, did my body give it away? I try hard saying mystery. Yeah, I'm human. Are you?
Sounds like a total nightmare, right? Well, it is. But I'm here to tell you that survival should have been a lot easier if anyone involved had just had half a brain. Despite the overwhelming horror and destruction, there's actually quite a bit of hope, both during the game and even after its ending. So join me as my hubris once again compels me to stare existential dread in the face and say, nah, I'd win. Just a warning, this video will contain major spoilers for Soma, so if you haven't played it yet, I highly recommend you do so. It's one of those games that's best experienced, and once the story's spoiled for you, it kinda ruins it. So leave the video and come back once you played it, or if you don't care or have already played, stick around. The setting of Soma is straightforward. It's the year 2104, and a massive comet has struck the Earth, obliterating all surface life. The sole survivors are those who took refuge in the underwater Pathos 2 base, shielded by several kilometers of ocean. In the months leading up to the impact, the world made repeated efforts to divert or destroy the comet, right up until a few hours before the catastrophe. While the exact timeline of these missions remains unclear, we do know the comet was discovered 15 years prior to the impact in the year 2089. Despite having 1.5 decades to prepare for the inevitable, humanity's most significant achievement was a series of failed attempts to destroy the comet and the creation of an underwater research base. Orbits don't arbitrarily change, so even if humanity initially failed to realize the comet was headed directly for Earth, they still would have quickly identified the threat. A comet can't just swerve into Earth's path. It doesn't have the stealth for a sneak attack, and even with a comical lack of understanding or preparation, they still would have had a few years of notice, at minimum, for Earth's inhabitants to brace themselves. For a real-world example, look at the asteroid 2024 YR4. It was discovered relatively recently, and there's already talk of it potentially colliding with Earth in 2032. Despite having just discovered the asteroid, we already have enough data to know that it probably won't hit us in 8 years. Now contrast that with Soma. Humanity had 15 years of warning, and they were fairly certain early on that the comet was gonna hit. With modern technology and surveying techniques, we were able to determine in just a few months that 2024 YR4 was not gonna hit Earth. It went from being high risk to basically no risk. Now compare this to the people of the future in Soma. They spotted a comet that's bigger than 2024 YR4, and they had even more time to observe it. They would have known really quickly it was probably gonna hit, and then they had 15 years to prepare for that inevitability. And we know they were fairly certain that the comet was gonna hit because the people of Earth created the International Asteroid Deflection Program, a worldwide international agency dedicated to just stopping this one comet. Despite having a worldwide agency dedicated to stopping the comet, they failed to make any real progress in preparing for the impending disaster. Now some of you might be thinking that they made some progress because they at least tried to deflect it, and they built that underwater base. Well, here's the fun fact. They didn't build Pathos 2. Pathos 2 was built in the 2060s to study hydrothermal vents. Pathos 2 would later be significantly upgraded and expanded, but this wasn't to help the people in it survive the comet. This was done decades earlier, so they could install a giant space gun to shoot satellites into orbit from under the water. The fact that the people in it survived the comet impact had nothing to do with it being built or prepared as a redoubt for humanity. It just happened to be in the right place at the right time to survive a comet. I find it difficult to believe that with so much time, the world made no significant plans to survive the comet's impact, apart from relying on the hope that one isolated underwater base could weather the storm. Surely world governments, even the most corrupt, would have been motivated to safeguard their citizens, if not for the sake of the planet, then for their own political survival. Given that we know politicians are often more self-serving than altruistic, it's hard to accept that every world leader simply decided to resign themselves to death, leaving only a few individuals to survive at the bottom of the ocean. In the game, text and audio logs reveal that the world was fully aware of its impending doom, yet accepted that Pathos 2 was humanity's last hope. But if the world had such a grim realization in the lead up to the comet, why were no upgrades made to make Pathos 2 truly self-sustaining or to transform it into a functional last refuge for humanity? The team had 15 years to devise a backup plan in case the comet couldn't be stopped, but they failed to act. It's like they just decided to send up a group of oil drillers to the comet, and when that didn't work, they just decided they were gonna die. They didn't even ensure Pathos 2's safety, let alone establish other refuges. This is a future where humanity has mastered robotics and AI, and yet no one thinks maybe we should prepare an alternative just in case we can't stop the comet. With 15 years of warning, I'm certain that humanity in 2025, even with far fewer technological resources, could have managed to create a self-sustaining colony in a safer location. After all, if the future of the human race was truly and tangibly at stake, I reckon the majority of the world's resources would be put towards stopping it. Soma repeatedly insists that there's no human life left on Earth, but I find that hard to believe. Are we supposed to believe that all of the Earth's powerful and wealthy elites just sat back and waited for the comet? I can't imagine that. If they had 15 years of warning, I'm certain the US government would have retreated underground. There's no way egotistical billionaires like Elon Musk wouldn't be hiding in their own personal bunkers. If Pathos 2 truly was the only safe place on Earth, and the world knew a few hours before the comet hit, realistically what would have happened is the powerful and wealthy would have commandeered Pathos 2 long ago, kicking out the scientists. The fact that that didn't happen either means one of three things. Either A, the powerful and wealthy probably are surviving in their own underwater bases or bunkers. B, they truly had no backup plan and it never occurred to them to commandeer the one safe place. Or C, despite everything, the people of Soma are way more altruistic than people of Earth today. In the end, there are two plausible explanations for what happened. Humanity had 15 years to prepare for the apocalypse and achieved nothing except the hope that one isolated base built half a decade earlier would survive. Or the other one, the world's rich, powerful, and famous retreated to their own bunkers and secret underwater bases, leaving Pathos 2 as just one of many surviving locations, with the world's elite secure in their own preparations. If option 1 is true, then perhaps humanity and Soma deserve to be wiped out. That fact comes especially true when you take the WoW into consideration. The main antagonist of Soma is a supercomputer called the WoW. Well, calling it an antagonist is a bit of a stretch because the WoW isn't really malicious. It's just a dumb AI. And by dumb AI, I don't mean it's necessarily stupid, I mean it just has more in common with ChatGPT than say Cortana. It doesn't have a grand plan or malevolent intent, it just follows its programming and that's the exact problem. The WoW was secretly installed in Pathos 2 a few months before the comet hit. Its original purpose is unclear. Maybe it was meant to help the people survive the disaster, or maybe it was just another experiment. Either way, it was built in a secret part of Pathos 2 called Site Alpha, and it was overseen by a man named Johann Ross. Ross will be more important later. So the WoW had been installed a few months before the comet hit, and by the time the comet had hit, the WoW had already started acting weird. The WoW was designed to maintain Pathos 2 and to protect its inhabitants. Simple enough, right? But after the comet wiped out all life on the surface, the WoW had to redefine what protecting the people of Pathos 2 meant, because now, the people of Pathos 2 were the only humans left. Its goal went from protecting the people of Pathos 2 to protecting humanity, because they became the same thing. At first, everything seemed fine. The WoW optimized itself and most of the station's electronics to run more efficiently. Wait a minute, did it just self-improve? So as it turns out, the WoW is fully capable of reprogramming itself and other electronics, which typically isn't a good start if you have an unrestrained AI. Not only did it start reprogramming itself, it also was able to alter its own physical form. Flowing through the pipes of Pathos 2 is this magical future liquid called structure gel. This black liquid is basically sci-fi magic, because it can apparently react to electrical and magnetic signals, and through that electrical or magnetic signals, a person can tell the gel to harden to repair a section of the station, to become conductive, or even to form circuitry. So in the process of trying to figure out what it meant to preserve humanity, the WoW ended up covering itself in structure gel and supercharging its own computational power by turning the structure gel into more circuitry and using the gel to connect itself to every electronic in the station to give itself even more computational power. So let's see, the world has ended and all the people left are at the mercy of a self-improving, self-reprogramming AI. Oh, and did I mention that there's no way to interact with it or shut it down? It's completely inscrutable, and its core is locked away in a top-secret base only 3 people even know about. One of those 3 people is the aforementioned Johann Ross. Ross, being the genius that he is, personally removed all the safeguards and overrides on the WoW before the comet hit. So now humanity's last survivors are stuck under the control of a self-improving AI with no off switch buried at the bottom of an ocean. What could possibly go wrong? Well, basically all of Soma went wrong. The WoW kept improving itself and redefining what it meant to preserve human life. The problem? No one could update or correct its understanding of what that meant. So it started taking brain scans of everyone in the station and then uploading those scans in the robots. Because apparently protecting human life means putting a human brain in a door. Predictably, this didn't end well. The WoW kept creating horrific human-robot hybrids, which had the unfortunate side effect of murdering the still living survivors. If humanity is on the verge of extinction, maybe don't put them under the control of a self-improving machine you can't shut off or interact with. That should be obvious. But given the other failings of the people in Soma, maybe this was to be expected. The only generally useful thing the WoW did is upgrade the structure gel beyond its original capabilities. In fact, it even found a way to use the structure gel to raise the dead. Wait, what? So yeah, the WoW has turned itself into a big fleshy meatball and has uploaded human brains into everything with a circuit board. But that's not all. It has also figured out how to use structure gel to not only mutate living tissue and create horrible abominations of nature, but it can also raise the dead now. Between fish with human faces and this, I can't imagine why anyone could possibly doubt the WoW's capabilities. It's obviously a worthy shepherd of humanity. Despite everything I've said, remember that the WoW is just a dumb AI. It can't feel or truly think. It only follows its directive, so it's not truly evil. The people mostly responsible for everyone dying are these two idiots. Meet Terry Akers and previous character Johan Ross. Let's start with Akers. Akers is a random southern guy who was in charge of Site Delta. Site Delta is the part of Pathos 2 that was in charge of building the casings for the satellites for the orbital gun. If you're going to launch something through a space gun, it's best to use protection. And that's what Site Delta was in charge of. Shortly after the comet struck, the majority of Pathos 2 staff were ordered to rendezvous at Site Theta. Theta was the largest site with the most living quarters, so it made sense to consolidate manpower there, especially since most of the sites were no longer necessary given that the space gun was useless following the collapse of society. Everyone went along with this, except Terry Akers. Being an old curmudgeon, he refused to leave because leaving Site Delta effectively meant he was getting demoted since he was the head of Site Delta. Ignore the fact that it's the end of the world, and that only 60 people are left, and that your job means nothing and your site is no longer functional because once again, it's the end of the world. Being unofficially demoted was one step too far for old Akers, so he decided to stay behind at Site Delta alone. He promptly went insane from the solitude and then started eating the forbidden soup, aka structure gel. This gem of a man mutated into a horrific abomination, clawed out his own eyes, and then accepted the open invitation to go to Site Theta and asked for someone to come pick him up. Now, the reason he asked for people to come pick him up is so he could murder them. The people showed up, he ambushes them, kills them, and fills their bodies with structure gel so they can become abominations like him. Needless to say, him and his newly created monster friends make their way to Site Theta and turn humanity's last true refuge into a graveyard full of monsters and corpses. At some point, he also helps create the Mind Coral, which traps most of the living crew. Mind Coral is basically a red growth that surrounds people and puts them in a blissful dream state. Overall, Terry Akers is responsible for about 50% of all the deaths, I reckon. If you remove him from the equation, Site Theta would probably still be chugging along by the time the main character gets there. But for all the bad things Terry did, there's one person who's more responsible for everything that happened at Pathos 2, and that man is Johan Ross. As I said earlier, Ross was the man in charge of the WoW. He helped build it, and he was also the idiot who removed all of its safeguards ahead of time. Johan was stationed at Site Tau. Tau was a small base and mostly was meant as housing for the people who worked at the orbital gun more directly. Johan didn't work at the gun, he worked at Site Alpha, which was nearby. Following the end of the world, the people of Site Tau decided to hike up to Site Omnicron, because Omnicron was another bigger site like Theta. On the way, they start getting attacked by weird mutated wildlife. This wildlife ends up killing most of the people from Site Tau along with Johan himself. You would never guess, What caused the wildlife to be mutated? It was the WoW. They got attacked by fish with human faces. During routine maintenance, the people of Site Omicron end up finding Ross's body. They take it inside of Omicron and put it inside a secure containment cell because they have nowhere else to put a corpse. The WoW, being the RAL, sees Ross's dead body and is determined to revive it with structure gel. There's one problem. Secure containment cells block electromagnetic waves. So even though there's plenty of structure gel in Ross's body, the WoW can't revive him easily, so it has to start increasing the frequency that it sends out the waves to activate the gel. The increasing frequency of the waves gives everyone in Site Omicron super bad headaches and nosebleeds. This is because the waves start overwhelming the black boxes in their heads. Everyone in Pathos 2 has this little thing called a black box attached to their brain. It basically is just a way for others to remotely access their vitals in case there's an emergency. The WoW lets out one massive shriek to revive Ross, and this overloads all the black boxes, causing the heads of everyone in Site Omicron to pop. The reason for the shriek is unclear. Either the WoW was increasing its frequency to even higher levels to revive Ross, and this accidentally got everyone killed, or it intentionally killed everyone. Midway through being brought back to life, Ross gained telepathy for some reason and started communicating with the members of Site Omicron. He was telling them to kill the WoW, gave them instructions on how to do it, and even told them the secret location of Site Alpha. The WoW then presumably shrieked to protect itself. Neither is a good look on Ross, because the AI he built and removed all safeguards from either A, dumb enough that it can kill dozens of people at once while trying to revive one person, or B, it is fully willing and capable to kill dozens of people to preserve itself, despite its only directive being keep humanity alive. So no matter what, their deaths are his fault, since he's the one who built the thing and removed all the safeguards. And in a much broader scale, if you remove Johann and the WoW from Pathos 2, almost no one dies. Acre is fully capable of staying behind and going crazy, but without the magical gel mutating him into a nigh invincible monster, he can't then go to Theta and kill everyone. Without the WoW, you don't have a bunch of robots on site having human minds uploaded into them, and then those minds going insane and the robots going on murderous rampages. You also don't have structure gel spewing out of every possible crevice in the facility, trying to connect itself to every electronic, thus causing more danger to people and even causing some people to accidentally choke on structure gel when doing things like putting on a diving suit, because the WoW filled the suit with structure gel to use the electronics in the suit. If you remove both Ross and Akers, 90% of what went wrong at Pathos 2 doesn't happen. Really, if you just get rid of Ross or replace him with someone smart enough to not remove all the safeguards from the super AI, you're already in a much better place. After all that, it may seem like there's very little hope for humanity, but there are still a few ways people could bounce back. For starters, as I said earlier, there's a solid chance that other people exist somewhere on Earth. The idea that only Pathos 2 survived is just unlikely. On top of that, not everyone in Pathos 2 is dead. Sarah Lindwell, for example, is still alive and unmutated. Sure, she's on life support, and depending on your choices, you can kill her. But that's besides the point. There's still at least one living person. In fact, there are several. Throughout Theta, you find plenty of people trapped in the mind coral. While their bodies are horribly emaciated, their brains are still fully functional. They're in fact trapped in a blissful dream state by the coral. I struggle to see how they wouldn't be considered alive. I'm not sure how feasible it is to remove them from the coral, but it's certainly an option to try. You only need to rescue and resuscitate one or two of them for humanity to have a chance at rebuilding. And, despite the WoW's many missteps, it's clear that it's improving at replicating humans. One of its core methods is uploading a scanned consciousness into any available body or machine when it can't resurrect a person with structure gel. Most of these attempts fail. The resurrected people often go insane due to the disconnect between mind and body. But the WoW's getting better. The biggest proof? The main character, Simon. Simon is an old brain scan uploaded into a diving suit with a dead body and some electronics shoved in. Not the most elegant setup, but it turns out that having human proportions and a mostly biological body makes a huge difference. Unlike most of the WoW's other creations, Simon remains functional and self-aware, and not insane. If the WoW keeps refining its process, it could eventually create stable human bodies for these digital consciousnesses. And let's not forget that structure gel is basically future magic. The WoW keeps finding new and novel ways to use it. There's even cut content from Soma that suggests the WoW originally was going to create fully humanoid structure gel-based bodies. In early versions of the game, a small helper robot named K8 would have been kidnapped and given a human-like body. While this was removed from the final version, it serves as a proof of concept. The WoW could, in theory, create functional human forms. If it ever manages to bridge the insanity gap, then the uploaded human minds it uses could become a continuation of humanity. It would be a different humanity in a different world, but it would still be a new form that could survive and spread. And then of course, there's the Ark. The Ark is Soma's ultimate objective. When it became clear that everything was falling apart, the people of Pathos 2 created a digital paradise, a virtual world where brain scans could live indefinitely. They planned to launch it into orbit where these digital versions of themselves could exist for centuries, free from the horrors of Earth. Your objective for most of the game is gathering the Ark and launching it into orbit so humanity can survive through it. While I like the Ark as an idea, I struggle to see it as a true solution for saving humanity. At the end of the day, it's just a bunch of minds floating in a virtual box, with no way to interact with the outside world. Eventually the satellite will break down, and that will be the end of it. But there is still some hope for them to get out of it. In another game called Stellaris, there's an in-game event where you find an Ark floating in space. It's full of the digital brain scans of a long-dead race. You have the option to pull out the brain scans, genetically recreate the species, and then put the brain scans back in the new bodies, thus reviving the species from the dead. If the Stellaris setting has aliens, and the people in the Ark get really lucky, there's a non-zero chance that at some point they'll get picked up by some aliens, revived, and then plopped on a new planet. The chances aren't high, but it's at least a possibility. So between the Ark, the still living people, and the WoW's apparent improvements in recreating human life, I'd say the ending of Soma isn't as bleak as it first seems. It didn't have to be this bad though. If the people in charge weren't total idiots, why did Earth have no contingencies? Who thought building an uncontrollable AI with no failsafes was a good idea? If those guys had been removed from the equation, maybe Soma's world wouldn't have collapsed in just a year after the comet hit. So yeah, that's it. It's crazy that it took me a whole year to make a semi-sequel to my most popular video, but honestly it just wouldn't have felt right to turn Blank Isn't As Bleak As You Think into a full series. The first video was a one-off, and I obviously never intended to become popular. Forcing more out would just weaken the quality, and honestly, I don't want to just make videos because they're popular. I want to make what I want to make when I make it. Now, if this video also gets 2 million views, I might reevaluate things. Anyways, thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.